How do we as editors see Little Nightmares 2? My name is Sarah.
And my name is Caitlin, and that is a question that we will explore as we dive into the nitty-gritty of its editing, sound and camera techniques.
Little Nightmares 2 is a puzzle platform video game that explores the adventures of Mono, and later Six, two little characters in a distorted and corrupt universe, on their quest to take down the signal tower and save the world. After a difficult journey, our two adventurers meet their fate in the signal tower, where our analysis begins with the two final scenes of the game.
We begin the first scene with a chase sequence as Mono and Six try to evade the falling rubble and emerging flesh within the tower walls. We see the handheld camera following the pair as the player becomes immersed in the action. Mono, struggling to catch up, almost falling out of frame as the camera continues to follow Six, who disregards Mono's struggles as she makes it to safety. This actually foreshadows her betrayal and her contribution to Mono's fate, a motive which is highlighted throughout the game. As Mono approaches the bridge, the scene plays out in slow motion. This editing technique is introduced to grasp the player's attention, evoking more emotion as we watch the story continue.
What complements this technique especially is the music, a melody set in a high key which leads into a crescendo, again drawing the player into the story. As Mono leaps towards Six, the tone of the music begins to get hopeful, indicating relief for our protagonist and the player themselves. But with freedom just in arm's reach for Mono, the music suddenly morphs into a minor key, representing the long-awaited betrayal for this character. We see the camera come closer to our two protagonists for an intimate moment of relief, as we are left on a literal cliffhanger where time seems to stop, before a sharp pullback of the camera revealing one of the game's major plot twists.
The narrative showcased in this scene refers to a dramatic technique called anagnosis, where a character makes an important discovery. In this case, it refers back to the Aristotelian definition of tragedy, where a character's true intentions are revealed. As Mono lingers in the air, he realises Six's true colours because of that pause. This ultimately leaves a lasting impact for the player. The use of the technique and its relevance to the story is emphasised further.
After the fateful drop, time seems to slow down to reveal the significance of the twist, allowing the player to process the gravity of the situation. However, after Mono is out of frame, time returns to normal, as Six leaves Mono to fall to his demise, conveying the perspective of Six as she slowly walks through the portal. This motion change again reflects the scene's main motives, but also enhances the importance of the scene overall, since without this change, the scene would leave very little dramatic effect for the player.
The change of pace is something to consider with this scene, as we go from a chasing sequence to a cliffhanger to a slow but painful demise for Mono, leading from action to a dramatic end for the scene, suggesting deeper roots of the tragedy that surrounds Mono's character. However, moving forward to the next scene, pacing focuses on exploration and self-discovery, directing the player to the final, and most major, turning point of the game.
The final scene of the game opens with an 18-second fade-out/fade-in from a black transition, reflecting the passage of time, and again giving the player time to process the events of the prior scene. The action starts with a 30-second sequence of Mono exploring his new environment, as a lack of gravity is forcing him and the player to slow down whilst the camera matches his pace, creating a sense of frustration, further immersing the player into the narrative. The environment we see consists of a sea of flesh surrounded by darkness, with minimal lighting above our protagonist, indicating a trapped feeling and any sense of escape. Exploring the environment further, unsettling squelches fill the silence as Mono progresses, adding a sense of realism as fear and disgust are enhanced, further complementing the editing and contributing to this final scene of the game.
As the scene progresses, Mono comes across a chair mounted on high ground, illuminated by a spotlight indicating the path he must now take. We see him stand on the chair as the lighting dims, after which his grotesque surroundings are revealed as the camera pulls back once more, emphasising fear and enhancing the feeling of claustrophobia for Mono and the player. Mono becomes increasingly distressed, as reflective upon the jittered camera movements and chromatic aberrations surrounding the screen, as a blue hue becomes more prevalent, possibly indicating the loneliness and isolation that Mono is about to face. This showcases Mono's psychological space and how it has been corrupted by the current events in the signal tower.
We hear music that begins to fade in, whilst TV noise and slight humming starts to play as Mono becomes increasingly entrapped, referring back to escapism and the corruption of Mono's mind. As Mono is engulfed by his surroundings, we are led to the only sharp cut of the game, as the scenery changes to dark, barren room illuminated by a single pink spotlight, representing the climactic point of the current events in the sequence. This also suggests the return of Mono's innocence, and the grasp that the signal tower still has on Mono, as previously stated earlier in the game, as the towers representing colour.
Mono stands on the chair and views his surroundings, pauses and accepts his fate, sitting on the chair for the foreseeable future. We are taken through a sequence of Mono's life progressing, from childhood to teen years to adulthood, differentiated from a vibrant pink to dull blue lighting, complemented by fade-in and fade-out transitions, serving as an effective technique to show the passage of time. The lack of vibrancy as well as the specific colour change again shows a loss of innocence for Mono and invokes a psychological reaction for the player as they associate the colourful to monotone visuals with a sense of defeat, finally seeing our protagonist destined to a life of loneliness and melancholy.
We are gradually introduced to the final score of the game, a high-key melody with a ticking noise representing a clock, indicating the passing of time for Mono. A distorted piano bass line comes into effect as we see the final transition of Mono and the Thin Man, the biggest revelation of the game, where our protagonist is revealed to be the game's anti-hero all along. As the sequence ends, we hear the melody playing in a more sombre tone, now indicating that Mono's time loop has ended and the Thin Man's have just begun. The music we hear establishes a more personal connection between the player and Mono. Being misled to believe his fate after playing as the character for the entire game, but are granted a greater understanding of the game's plot and hidden motives, especially for Thin Man.
The game ends with a stretched out Dutch angle as the door on the Thin Man closes, representing the power and control he has until the very end, ultimately keeping the player hooked as he is illuminated in a blue spotlight until the door closes and a pink light is briefly shown just before the screen fades to black. The final lighting changes strongly suggest the passage of time continuing and the rebirth of Mono as the Thin Man, but an ominous feeling lingers in the air as the player is left to reel from the events of the game, emphasising the fear and uneasiness that is left behind in this little world.
How do we as editors see Little Nightmares 2? Together, we see a cinematic masterpiece with stunning visuals, beautiful sound, and a strong, cohesive story that has made a lasting impact on the gaming community.
But we also see a game which displays a range of techniques, transitions, and effects which allowed players to be immersed into the gameplay, leaving behind a changed perspective for our characters and more theories for the player to explore long after they finish the game.
As we analysed the editing of Little Nightmares 2, we discovered more to the game than meets the eye. But why let us tell you? It's only $14.99 on Xbox.